Hey academic mamas and academic world, welcome back to my channel. So today is the start of something new. I've decided to zhuzh things up a bit and put some of my favorite things together. One of them obviously being academia. We're keeping with the theme, but we are going to be doing true crime and tea, where we sip tea and we dissect the truth. I'm your host, Lily, as usual, and I'm here to explore true crime through the lens of motherhood, academia, and everything in between. We are going to be dissecting many different cases through many different academic lenses. So if you like things like this, don't forget to subscribe and let's get into the story. Today's story is wild, almost impossible. Imagine you're facing a second-degree murder charge. You're in isolation and somehow you end up pregnant by a man who you've never physically met. No conjugal visits, no hallway glances. There's just one thing that connects you, and it's an air vent. This case isn't just bizarre, it's layered. It makes us confront things like the psychology of confinement, the desire for legacy, maternal instinct under pressure, and above all, critical thinking or lack thereof. So let's just jump into it. So meet Maisie Link, 29, and Joan Depaz, 24. I think his name is Joan. It could be Juan, but it's not spelt like Juan, so we're calling him Joan. They're two inmates that were at the Gunnar Guilford Night Correctional Center in Miami-Dade County, both facing murder charges separately. So they are not co-conspirators, they are facing two separate murder charges. And yet somehow they became parents together in June of 2024. How though? They spent hours and hours talking through the air vents, and it turned into something of an emotional bond that then turned into them life planning, and eventually it led to what Daisy would call a miracle baby. Okay. Joan, knowing that he's likely never going to experience something like fatherhood in the traditional sense, told Daisy that he wanted a child. And apparently that's all that Daisy needed to hear, because they started on their journey to procreation. Let's pause here because there is a lot to unpack. And yes, it is very weird. Very weird. It's very weird and it's very extreme, but also it's very deeply human. So let's break this down and look at it objectively through our academic lens. So let's think of the constrained autonomy and reproductive desire. So obviously they are both incarcerated. They're both under suspicion of second-degree murder. And when I read the case, Daisy was there for something to do with domestic related violence. So potentially, it may be reduced. She's obviously killed someone, maybe it was by accident. Inevitably, they're both there because they're incarcerated. Joan himself knew that there was not really going to be another way for him to be a father. There was not a conventional way for him to meet someone outside of the confinement of prison and reproduce. So obviously incarceration limits nearly all personal freedoms, but the drive to leave a legacy, to create life, to be a parent is deeply biological and psychological. So we see Daisy and Joan asserting reproductive autonomy. They've taken control of their own reproduction in a space that denies them that right. It virtually denies them everything else. Somehow they've managed to overcome that obstruction and reproduce and have a child. They had a healthy baby girl out of this instance, right? But here is the critical question. Is that autonomy informed or is it impulsive? Because when you think of the responsibility that they are not going to be able to have as parents, because Joan himself states he is not going to be able to be a father in the traditional sense, meaning probably most of his life and most of his daughter's life is going to be spent with him being incarcerated, him being locked up in prison. Was that an informed decision? Was that the correct decision for him to make as the father, just because he wanted to leave a legacy? Or was it impulsive in the moment, thinking, we haven't even got to trial yet, they're in jail, they're not in prison, they're in jail, so there's the potential for them to be let out depending on how good the defense is, how the court proceedings go, what the jury understanding of the crimes are that they've committed. So there is always going to be the potential that they can get out of prison or get out of jail or not be convicted of a crime. However, was it so impulsive to think, I am just going to assume I'm never going to be able to have a child outside of here, so let's make a baby through the air vents? So when you are writing assignments where you have to think about both sides of the story, this is a really good example to explore how, when you are given the choice to make an informed decision, or if someone is making an impulsive decision, inevitably they both have the same outcome, but was the outcome reached in the correct way? And then also when you think about when you are searching for pieces of evidence and things like that, are you impulsively choosing pieces of evidence that just support your fact? The decision that they made was they just wanted a child, they wanted to be parents, but they didn't look at all of the external factors that come into them reproducing. The fact that now Joan's parents are looking after their daughter, that's an added responsibility he's now given to his parents, because he does not have he's not able to take care of his child. Did they consider that? Did they consider the financial aspects of the decision that they're going to make for the people that are going to be looking after their child? And that's what happens when you pick pieces of literature that just fit a certain narrative. You don't dig deeper into all of the other outcomes, all of the different things that can contribute to the outcome of your essay question that you're answering or the projects that you're doing. So in this case in particular, the critical question is that autonomy informed or is it impulsive? The autonomy they've given themselves to reproduce. The second point is the carceral state and unethical oversight. So how was it even possible for them to be able to get pregnant? How was it even possible for them to be able to reproduce? Using makeshift tools and bodily ingenuity, Joan wrapped up his man juice in plastic wrap 5 times a day. That is wild. 5 times a day. He's obviously on a mission because he's done that 5 times a day. And then he passes it through the air vents to Daisy. She then uses a yeast infection applicator, or yeast infection applicators, because she does this process more than once, to inseminate herself. And as impossible as you think this would be, through a month of trial and error, at the end of it, we obviously know the outcome of the story, she was pregnant. DNA confirmed that Joan was the father, and the baby was a healthy girl, and she was born in June 2024. Initially, the jail staff were alarmed because they thought that it could potentially have been linked to an assault in the jail. So someone may have been assaulting Daisy, one of the inmates, probably not, potentially one of the guards, one of the officers. But the science and the story say otherwise. So scientifically, what they've done is not impossible because it's happened, but DNA also proved that he was the father, so it obviously wasn't any of the officers. What does this say about surveillance within the institution? What does this say about the healthcare? Because there would have been healthcare providers involved in this now because they're having a child. And inmate support in prison, were they given the psychological support, or were they even able to speak to somebody before they made such a big life choice? Daisy said that her pregnancy tests were ignored for weeks. Does that say something about the system that they have been put into? Yes, they've done something wrong, and yes, their rights are technically no longer there. But just ethically, when you look at this from the outside looking in, was the treatment that she was given acceptable, especially given that she would have had a number of positive pregnancy tests that all got ignored? How long was that left for before anybody done anything about it? And you can kind of come to a conclusion that that is not just neglect. They neglected the needs of an inmate purely because she was an inmate. I'm making an assumption here, but that's the conclusion I've drawn. It's an institutional failure. Everybody involved in the care and well-being of these two people neglected them, and they failed to uphold their roles in this instance. If you disagree, please do let me know in the comments, because I feel like there is so much more to unpack when it comes to the ethical side behind it. But that is my opinion. It was not just neglect, it was a whole institution that contributed to this outcome, and this child potentially not having a quality of life that she may have had her parents had been, upstanding, two parents working outside in the real world, not with that backstory. First of all, oh yeah, parents had me through an air vent while they were both locked up in jail, or the fact that her grandparents are now raising her and there's a potential for a bit of struggle there. Are they older in age? There's so many questions. So when you think about it in that sense, you can kind of come at it objectively and say, was this neglect? I think it is, but then you have to obviously prove why you think it's neglect. And one of the statements there is the fact that she was ignored for weeks when it came to her pregnancy tests. And then the third academic lens is the critical thinking versus emotional impulse. We already spoke about whether this was an informed decision or whether it was an impulsive decision. From a pedagogical lens, what were they thinking? We know he in particular said he felt that he would never be able to have children in the conventional sense, but she still didn't question that. Like, just continued to say, oh yep, sure, of course, I'll do it. And for every time she was provided with a yeast infection applicator, because they would have had to give that to her, she wasn't going to the shops to buy them, so they would have had to give her that product. Were they not questioning that as well? So what were they thinking? Were they even thinking about what happens once they do get pregnant? And then what happens once the baby comes? Did they consider that? Or was this just an emotional escape from confinement and trauma? Because remember, Daisy is potentially going to be convicted of second-degree murder because of a domestic reason. There was some form of domestic violence linked to her case, and there may be some trauma linked there. But this case is a prime example for understanding decision making under pressure. In the confinement of incarceration, they are in a pressurized environment where all they're potentially going to be doing throughout the day is just dwelling on the fact that I'm not going to be able to have children outside of here. I could be here for the next 20 to 25 years. By the time I come out, is it even going to be possible to meet someone? So in a pressurized environment, the understanding of decision making and how it is linked to critical thinking is this is a very good example of that. And it's also a good description of if you are not thinking critically when you're writing assignments. For example, you leave your assignment to the last moment, it's due on the 25th and you're writing your 5,000 words on the 23rd. I don't know why you would be doing that, but for example, are you thinking critically about the structure, about how you're constructing your assignment, or are you working through emotion? I just need to get it done. I'm panicking. I don't work well under pressure, but for some reason I've left it to the last minute. And because you're in that pressurized situation, there is the potential for not making informed decisions and not finding the right bits of evidence to back up what you want to talk about. So this is a prime example of how decision making under pressure can be impacted, and how hope, trauma, and desperation can cloud logic. You hope to get a good grade. You are thinking about all the other instances where you've left things to the last minute, and now right at the end you're writing the assignment and the trauma of that is coming back to you because the panic is there, it's setting in, and you are desperate to get a reasonably good grade. Does that cloud your logical judgment and your ability to be critical and analytical and all of that good stuff? Does that cloud your judgment because you just need to get it done? Now, here's where I bring the academic mamas into this conversation. What does it mean to become a mother while awaiting trial for taking a life? That's the question I'm posing. How do we reconcile the sanctity of motherhood with the chaos of a murder charge? Now, obviously, this is a very unique situation. The medical professionals that were involved in this case, they themselves said it's almost impossible. Obviously, they achieved it, but this situation is almost physically impossible. So the fact that it happened shows somewhat of great determination to be able to conceive. But also, there's something that gets missed, and I think that's the baby. So let's talk about the baby. What future awaits this beautiful little girl that was conceived in such an unconventional circumstance? The story that she is going to have to tell and the story that she's going to have to share is going to be quite wild. But what does that mean for her? Are we projecting if we do call it a miracle? Or we're not dismissive enough to the madness that this situation is? Are we projecting our own thoughts and our own feelings because we are mothers on this situation and thinking, oh, but there was a beautiful little baby girl that came out of it and it's just so lovely and she's just so cute, and oh, are we projecting? Because it's crazy to think that they conceived a child through air vents. Anyway, that's my question to the mothers out there. What are your thoughts? What awaits this child that was conceived? How do we reconcile the sanctity of motherhood when it comes to the chaos of a murder? And are we projecting when we say that this beautiful little bundle of joy was a miracle? Should we be a bit more dismissive? Let me know in the comments what you think. But lastly, there is that element that we need to think about when it comes to the state's role in regulating reproduction in prison. And many a time there has been the conversation over fertility and reproduction when someone is behind bars. And there is that question there of, do the parents deserve punishment for even bringing a child into this world that they're not going to take responsibility for, because they won't be able to look after her if they are incarcerated for that long period of time? Or do we interrogate the system that even allowed this to happen? The fact that their cells were so close together that they were able to pass things through the air vents, does that call into question the types of prisoners that they are putting close together? Should there have been a man in the cell right next to a woman? How does that get regulated? Lots of questions. Let me know what you think in the comments. So this story literally does read like fiction, but it is real. It is a real case, the case of Daisy and Joan. And I know I'm probably saying his name wrong. I'm sorry. But it opens doors to deep academic inquiry on agency, ethics, and the complexity of just simply being a human behind bars. Please, please, please let me know your comments and let me know your thoughts below in the comments. And is this something that you would find really interesting to discuss in your class, in your seminars, in your lectures, depending on what type of course you're taking? If you're taking criminology, if you're taking psychology, looking at the psychology behind, incarceration and parenthood and all those things like that. What would your peers say, do you think? And for the educators, would this be an interesting topic for you to bring forward to your class and pose the questions that we've posed today? And what do you think your students would say? If today's episode challenged your thinking, share it with a fellow academic, share it with a fellow true crime lover, subscribe, comment, and come back next week for more truth and more tea. I haven't sipped a lot of tea today. It's almost full. There we go. But do come back for more truth, more tea, and more very hard questions. And until next time, use your mind, protect your peace, and don't let the air vents become your lifeline. Bye for now. Bye.